They thought they got away with it until the man they beat half to death walked in as their new boss. The courtroom was hotter than usual that day in Shreveport, Louisiana. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but nobody noticed. All eyes were on Judge Holloway, who barely looked up as he read the verdict. Case dismissed. 2 words, that's all it took. 2 words and it was over. In the back of the courtroom, Mike Holstead leaned back in his chair with a lazy stretch and a smirk spreading across his face. Beside him, Rick Donnelly gave a slow, deliberate clap under his breath. Quiet enough not to get reprimanded, but loud enough for everyone in the room to feel it. They weren't worried. They never were. Mike was a wide-shouldered guy with slicked back hair and a stare that made rookies sweat. Rick was leaner, rough around the edges, with crow's feet around eyes that hadn't blinked during testimony. They'd been through this dance more than once. This courtroom, this judge, this system, it always worked the same. They knew which lawyers folded under pressure. They knew which evidence mysteriously went missing. And they definitely knew how to make a civilian look like a liar on the stand. Their eyes shifted to the plaintiff, Andre Collins. Andre didn't flinch. He didn't shake his head. He just stared straight ahead, jaw locked, hands folded in his lap like he was praying. Not out loud, just in his head. He was dressed simple. Charcoal suit, no flash, tie a little worn at the edges, no emotion on his face, no outbursts, no attitude, just calm, too calm. Rick leaned over and whispered, "He thought he could take us down. Should have known better." Mike chuckled. "What's he going to do now? Write a blog post about it?" They stood as the judge exited, collecting their things like it was just another Wednesday. To them it was. But as Andre stood too, slow, quiet, collected, he didn't look beaten. He looked focused, like someone replaying every moment in his mind, like someone playing the long game. Outside, cameras waited. Reporters with notepads, local news crews with cheap microphones. Most of them ignored Andre. The headline was already written in their minds. Officers cleared in use of force case. Andre didn't stop to talk. He just walked past them all. Not defeated, just calculating. Inside the building, Rick slapped Mike on the back. "I say we hit King's barbecue. Celebrate a little. Ain't every day you embarrass a lawyer in court." Mike nodded, laughing. Yeah, that guy thought he was going to walk in with some moral badge and change the system. Poor bastard. But behind them in the same hallway, an older black man in a gray coat stood still. He watched them as they laughed and swaggered off. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at the back of their heads as they turned the corner. Andre Collins wasn't angry. Not anymore. He was ready. But sometimes the only way to clean rot out of a system is from the inside, before the suit, before the courtroom, before he ever became a lawyer. Andre Collins wore a badge, too. Not many people knew that. 15 years ago, Andre was one of the few black officers at the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office just outside New Orleans. Back then, he still believed in the idea that good people could change a broken system. He showed up early, kept his reports clean, did his job by the book, never raise. His voice, never lost his temper. He thought if he played it straight, he'd earn respect. And for a while, it looked like he had. But the real test came on a rainy Thursday night. He was off duty, headed home in an old blue Honda Civic, the kind you could hear rattling before you saw it. He had just pulled out of a gas station when flashing lights lit up behind him. No sirens, just lights. He pulled over right away, hands on the wheel, engine off, 2 patrol cars, 4 cops. He didn't recognize any of them at first, but once they stepped out, he saw the faces. He knew 2 of them from a training session months before, Mike Holstead and Rick Donnelly. No name tags, no greetings, no reason given. Just flashlights in his face and commands barked like orders to a dog. "Step out of the vehicle," Andre kept calm. "I'm law enforcement. Badges in the glove box. Did I ask you to speak?" That was Mike. Aggressive. Loud. Andre's voice stayed steady. "I'm reaching for my badge, that's all. Wrong move." He hadn't even unbuckled his seatbelt before they yanked the door open. Rick grabbed his collar. Mike punched first hard. Then came the knees, the kicks. Andre tried to cover his head, yelling his badge number over and over. It didn't matter. One of the other cops he never saw which pressed a knee into his neck. The rain made the pavement slick. All he could smell was oil and wet rubber. Somewhere in the background someone laughed. It lasted less than 2 minutes, but it wrecked the next 10 years of his life. When it was over, he was face down, soaked, bleeding from his mouth and ear. They let him go when someone finally ran his ID and confirmed his story. No apologies, no write-up, just a warning. You didn't see anything, and neither did we. Andre never filed a report. He was younger then, still believed he could fix things from inside. He told himself they'd get theirs someday. Instead, he resigned quietly 6 months later. That was when he went back to school. Law school, night classes, coffee at 2 a.m. Books filled with things he once thought had nothing to do with people like him. But he learned fast, too fast for some. Now, years later, he was a lawyer. Civil rights, excessive force cases, internal misconduct. He took on cases no one else would touch. Most times he lost, but sometimes he got close, just like he did this time. He hadn't brought the case against Mike and Rick to win. Not in court, at least. He'd brought it to document, to expose, to show people what kind of officers were still walking free. But that wasn't the end of the story. Because sometimes what looks like a loss is just the setup. But the difference between who you were and who you become is what you decide to do after they knock you down. Mike H. Holstead kicked his feet up on the table inside the precinct break room. A half-eaten donut sat on a napkin next to his badge. The air smelled like burnt coffee and sweat, and the hum of a busted vending machine filled the room. He loved this place. No cameras, no lawyers, just cops being cops. Rick Donnelly leaned back in his chair across from him, flipping through a sports magazine, though his eyes weren't really on the page. "You see how that Collins guy kept his mouth shut the whole time?" Rick asked. Didn't flinch like he had a poker face stitched on. Mike laughed mouth full. "Yeah, he's probably still crying in his shower. Right now. Should have never stepped into our ring." Rick shook his head. Man used to be a cop. You'd think he'd know better. That got a chuckle out of both of them. But their laughter wasn't just about Andre. It was habit, reflex. The way you talk when you've seen things and done things nobody's supposed to talk about. Things that got swept under desks or disappeared from dash cams. They weren't rookies anymore. They'd been in the game long enough to know how to play it dirty and still walk out clean. In another corner of the room, a younger officer, Caleb Morris, maybe 26, pretended to scroll on his phone, but he was listening. Everyone always listened when Halstead and Donnelly talked. They weren't just cops, they were the cops, the ones who didn't get called out, the ones who handled the real business. Rick leaned forward. "You remember last year? That kid in the green hoodie?" Mike squinted. "The one behind the liquor store." "Yeah, the runner." Mike's face broke into a grin. "Oh, yeah. Said he had asthma or something. Shouldn't be out here selling weed if he can't breathe." They both laughed again. Caleb didn't. He got up and left the break room fast. Rick watched him go. "You think he's soft?" Mike shrugged. "Doesn't matter. Guys like him don't last. Guys like us, we run this place." Rick nodded. "Damn right." There were whispers in the department. Rumors about internal audits, pressure from the mayor's office, some nonsense about corruption being swept under the rug for too long. Mike didn't care. He'd heard it all before. Every few years, someone got nervous, made some noise, maybe even shuffled a few names around upstairs, but nothing ever changed. The system didn't punish guys like him. It protected them. So when he heard that a new internal affairs commander was being transferred in from Baton Rouge, he barely looked up from his chili fries. "Another pencil pusher trying to play FBI," he said. "Let me guess. Clean haircut, pressed uniform, probably still uses a clipboard." Rick smirked. "You think this one's going to bark at us too?" Mike leaned back. "Let him bark. We don't flinch." He believed it. Deep down, he really did. They thought they were too smart to get caught, too feared to be questioned, too connected to fall. But outside that break room, behind office doors and hushed conversations, something was shifting. Files were being pulled. Names were being checked. Cases long buried were seeing daylight again. And in one of those files, a name stood out in bold ink. Andre Collins. But when you've spent years hiding behind a badge, you forget. Sooner or later, somebody always knocks on your door. 2 days later, the precinct was restless. Phones kept ringing, desks shuffled. A stack of HR memos sat unopened in Sergeant Wilkins's inbox. The usual rhythm felt off. Everyone felt it. even the ones pretending they didn't. In the hallway near the briefing room, 2 junior officers whispered near the coffee pot. "Did you hear?" one asked. "They brought in someone from outside. Internal affairs. Yeah, word is they didn't even go through the chief. Came from downtown. He'll push." The second officer raised his eyebrows. "You think it's about the Collins case? Maybe. Or maybe somebody finally got tired of sweeping trash under the rug. They didn't know half of it." Inside the locker room, Mike H. Halstead pulled on his vest and tightened the strap like he was gearing up for war. Rick Donnelly stood nearby, watching himself in the mirror, adjusting his belt. "You feel that?" Rick asked. "Feels like we're about to get a visit from one of those policy nerds." Mike smirked. "I'll give him 2 weeks before he tucks tail and runs." Rick checked his watch. "Briefing starts in 5. Let's go make him sweat." They strutted into the briefing room like they always did, shoulders back, voices loud. They slapped backs, cracked jokes, took their usual seats up front. A few officers chuckled at their comments, but most stayed quiet. Something was different today. The projector screen was off. No notes on the board, just a name on a fresh white placard, Commander Collins. Mike stared at it, confused at first. "You don't think?" He didn't finish the sentence. The door opened and in walked Commander Andre Collins, pressed uniform, clean lines, gold trim on his collar. Silence. It was the same man they'd watched walk out of the courtroom just days ago. The same man they had kicked, spat on, humiliated in the back of that gas station lot years earlier. He didn't flinch, didn't break stride. He walked to the front of the room, dropped a folder on the podium, and looked up. His voice was calm, direct. "Good morning. I'm Commander Andre Collins. I'll be overseeing all internal affairs activity at this precinct, effective immediately." Mike blinked. Rick stiffened in his seat. Andre paused, letting the room take it in. "Some of you already know who I am. Some of you only think you do. Either way, the only thing that matters now is this." He held up a thick manila envelope. "This folder contains 6 cases that were closed prematurely, all linked to 2 names that have appeared more than any others in our review." Mike's face twitched just for a second. Rick folded his arms, trying to look bored. Andre's eyes didn't leave them. "Let me make something very clear. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to clean house. And if that makes some of you uncomfortable, good. That means it's working." He didn't shout, didn't raise his tone, but every word hit like a punch. Then he nodded once, dismissed as the room emptied out in stunned silence. Mike and Rick didn't move. They stayed seated like statues. Rick finally muttered, "This some kind of joke?" Mike didn't answer. His jaw was clenched, eyes locked on the folder, still sitting on the podium. Andre didn't look at them as he gathered his papers. He didn't have to. He had the power now. But sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one you thought you already broke. It was supposed to be just another stop on the way home. Andre had finished a double shift. He was tired, hungry, and his shoulders still ACHD from a suspect takedown 2 nights before. He stopped at a gas station on Airline Drive to grab a bottled water and a microwave burrito. It was late, past midnight, and the place was mostly empty. As he stepped out and walked back to his car, headlights flared behind him. Red and blue filled the lot. He squinted at first, confused. Then came the sound of a car door slamming. Hands where I can see him. He froze, hands still on the door handle. Now 2 officers came into view. One was taller, heavy set, with slicked hair, and a voice that barked commands like they were gospel. The other looked younger, wiry, with a twitch in his left eye like he was waiting for a reason to explode. "Mike Halstead, Rick Donnelly." Andre raised both hands slowly. "I'm law enforcement off duty. Badge is in my car." Rick stepped closer. "Gun out." "What's that supposed to mean?" Andre spoke calmly. "My badge is in the glove compartment. Just give me a second." Mike didn't wait. He pushed Andre up against the car hard, real hard. The kind of hard that didn't come from training but from something else, something personal. "Think you're slick," Mike hissed in his ear. "Think you're better than us?" Rick yanked open the door, started rifling through the glove box, found the badge, tossed it onto the seat. "Yep, he's one of us," he muttered. Mike didn't back off. "Not one of us, just another mouth that doesn't know when to shut up." Andre turned his head slightly. "What's the problem here?" That's when the first punch landed. No warning, just a crack to the ribs. Then Rick joined in. Andre hit the pavement, elbow scraped, knee twisted, a boot to the side, a fist to the jaw. Somewhere in the chaos, one of them said, "Let's see how tough you feel now, officer." Rain started falling. Light at first, enough to soak through his clothes. He tried to cover his head, tried to say something, but his mouth was filling with blood. Everything blurred. Time stretched. Then it stopped. A third voice called out. Someone from dispatch on the radio. "Unit 3, respond. Confirm ID. That's Officer Andre Collins. Repeat. Officer Andre Collins." Rick backed off first. Mike spit on the ground. Nobody helped him up. Mike crouched down close and whispered, "You talk about this. You're done. Nobody's going to believe you." Then they left. Andre sat on the curb for 15 minutes before he could stand. When he got home, he didn't tell anyone. No ER visit, no official report, just painkillers, ice, and silence. He stared at himself in the bathroom mirror, eyes swollen, lips split, pride in pieces. But something inside him didn't die that night. Something changed. He knew then what the badge really meant in places like that. Not protection, not justice, just a mask some people wore to get away with anything. Andre didn't sleep that night. Didn't for a while, but when he finally did, he made a decision. Next time he saw those faces, it wouldn't be from the ground. But the most dangerous revenge isn't loud, it's patient. Commander Andre Collins didn't slam doors, he didn't yell, he didn't march through the halls trying to prove anything. He didn't have to. Every step he took was measured, every look, every word calculated. That's what made it worse for guys like Mike and Rick. They were used to confrontation. They thrived in it. Yelling matches, swinging fists, that's where they lived. But silence, calm, that kind of control that made their skin itch. For the first week, Andre barely looked in their direction. He spoke at meetings, gave orders, handed out assignments, but never directly to them. Not even eye contact. It was like they didn't exist, but they did, and they were sweating. Rick sat in the squad car one afternoon, chewing on sunflower seeds, watching Andre walk through the lot, talking to Detective Frazier. "You notice he never comes near us?" Rick asked. Mike shrugged. "He's playing mind games, thinks ignoring us is going to make us paranoid." Rick spat a shell out the window. "It's working." Mike didn't say anything. Back inside, Andre was pulling records. Not just theirs. Everyone's. He worked late. Real late. Most nights, he was the last one to leave. Files spread across his desk. Red pens, sticky notes, names, dates, patterns. The janitor, Mr. Keene, saw him once around midnight, still in uniform. "You don't sleep, huh?" Keene asked. Andre gave a small smile. "Not when there's work to do." He didn't tell Keene that he'd already found 6 reports with doctored timestamps, or that 3 body cams had gone missing under Mike's supervision, or that Officer Caleb Morris had quietly come to him with a trembling voice and said, "I don't want to be part of this anymore. I'll tell you everything." Andre had taken Caleb's statement in a small room with no windows and a broken AC unit. Caleb's hands shook the whole time. "They joke about it like it's nothing," Caleb said. "The things they do. I saw them rough up a kid last month just for running his mouth. Didn't file a report or nothing." Andre didn't say thank you. He just nodded and closed the file when they were done. He already knew Mike and Rick had left trails. People like them always did. They got sloppy over time. The same arrogance that kept them untouchable was the very thing that left fingerprints everywhere. Still, Andre didn't act. Not yet. He let them feel safe a little longer. He let them think maybe they were wrong. Maybe he wasn't coming for them. Mike started cracking jokes again in the break room. Rick went back to lifting weights in the gym like nothing had happened. They started walking like kings again. That's exactly what Andre wanted, because the moment a man stops looking over his shoulder is the moment he stops hiding the truth. One morning, Andre stepped into the morning brie. Fing with a stack of papers, he handed them out one by one. Everyone got a copy. Mike and Rick glanced at theirs, smirking until they saw the heading request for disciplinary review. Officers M. Holstead and R. Donnelly. 12 pages detailed. Every incident, every name, every pattern signed and submitted by Commander Andre Collins. Mike stood up. What the hell is this? Andre didn't blink. It's a process you should have learned in training. Sit down. Officer H. Rick was already red in the face. This some kind of personal vendetta? Andre looked him square in the eye. If it were personal, I'd be filing criminal charges. This is professional. Mike slammed the paper on the table. You trying to ruin us? Andre's tone didn't change. You did that yourselves. I'm just bringing it into the light. But the quiet ones, they don't come to warn you. They come to finish what you started. The storm didn't hit all at once. It started with a memo, then a suspension. By the end of the week, both Mike Holstead and Rick Donnelly were off active duty, pending investigation. Official word was internal review of conduct-related concerns. But inside the department, everybody knew what that meant. The whispers got louder. Officers who once laughed at Andre's cases now walked the halls quietly. Some even nodded when they passed him, not out of friendliness, but respect, or maybe fear. Mike sat in his driveway that night, engine running, headlights off. His wife hadn't said much since the news hit. His teenage son didn't even come out of his room. He just sat there staring at his hands. Hands that once dragged men off sidewalks and threw them against walls. Hands that flipped through case files like they were napkins. Now they were shaking. Rick wasn't taking it much better. He spent his nights at a dive bar on West 70th Street, drinking whiskey with retired cops who barely remembered his name. He complained to anyone who'd listened. They're trying to paint us like monsters. All we ever did was protect the streets. But deep down, even he knew this wasn't about one case. This was years catching up. They'd built their careers on fear, but now, fear was knocking on their doors. Meanwhile, Andre moved with purpose. He sat in meetings with city officials, laid out timelines, showed them footage, grainy security clips from gas stations, old dash cam backups that somehow escaped deletion. He had witness statements, sworn affidavit, medical records. Each piece told a story, and at the center of all of them, Mike and Rick. Then came the public hearing, not a courtroom this time, a civilian review board open to the press, community members, victims. Andre stepped to the podium in a fitted navy suit, clean lines, steady hands. He started with facts, dates, policies violated, internal code breaches, no fluff. Then he paused. I used to wear the same badge as these men, he said, looking up. I believed in what it stood for, but a badge doesn't protect character. It only reflects it. These men hid behind it, and when I tried to hold them accountable, they made sure I paid for it. He paused again. I didn't file charges back then. I walked away, but I've carried the weight of that night ever since. This isn't revenge, this is responsibility. There was no applause, no shouting, just stillness. Mike and Rick sat at the back, dressed in suits that didn't fit right. No uniforms, no badges, just two men aging fast under fluorescent lights. Rick leaned toward Mike. We can fight this. Mike didn't answer because for the first time maybe ever, he didn't know how. A week later, the board made their recommendation. Termination, permanent decertification, case files referred for possible prosecution. Mike got the news by phone. He didn't speak, just hung up. Rick threw a bottle across his living room and put a hole in the wall. Andre didn't celebrate. He just went back to his desk, back to the files, because there were others, other names, other officers, other victims who were told to be quiet. He couldn't undo the past, but he could sure as hell stop it from repeating. But justice doesn't always arrive in sirens. It walks in slow, takes notes, and waits for the right moment to speak. It was a rainy Thursday, almost poetic. Andre Collins stood alone in the same courtroom where it all began. Not for a case, not for a hearing, just standing. The benches were empty. The lights were dimmer than he remembered. But the silence, that was the part he liked best. He walked to the front, rested a hand on the wood railing, the same spot where he once sat quietly while two men laughed at his pain. Now they were gone, stripped of their badges, their names removed from department records. No more special treatment, no more protection. He didn't smile. This wasn't a victory lap. It was accountability long overdue, and still not enough because justice wasn't a destination. It was a grind, an everyday decision to do what's right, especially when it costs you. As he turned to leave, he saw Officer Caleb Morris standing in the doorway. You still working late? Caleb asked. Andre nodded. Always. Caleb stepped in, hands in his pockets. I just wanted to say thanks. I don't think I could have spoken up if you weren't here. Andre looked him over, young, nervous, but honest. That's how it starts, Andre said. One voice becomes two. Two becomes 20. Caleb hesitated. You ever regret coming back, taking this role? Andre exhaled. Every day, but I regret staying silent more. They stood there a moment, nothing dramatic, just understanding. Then Andre walked out. The city still had problems. The system wasn't fixed, but for once it bent just a little towards something better, and that was enough for now. Here's what this story teaches us. Power without accountability becomes a weapon, and silence, whether from fear or comfort, keeps the wrong people in charge. It's not just about cops. It's not just about one man. It's about the everyday choices people make in quiet rooms. The ones that don't go viral, the ones no one talks about. Andre Collins didn't win by shouting louder. He won by standing longer. So if you've been wronged, if you've been told to stay quiet, if someone's convinced you that nothing will ever change, don't believe them. Because change doesn't always come crashing in. Sometimes it walks in wearing a badge and finally does the job right. If this story made you feel something, share it. Start a conversation. Ask questions. Hold your systems accountable. Whether it's your school, your job, or your city, pay attention. Speak when it's hard, because staying quiet, that's how it keeps happening. Be the one who says,